Upsets and underdogs. Don't miss a moment of the action. Tune in over 96.7 KFAN Plus and on the free iHeartRadio app. Thanks to Dave Smith Motors.
Did I just see a player, a front court player for Tennessee State, 15-seeded Tennessee State, get thrown out of the game? They're taking on a 2-seed Iowa State. There's 7.5 minutes to go. Iowa State is up 91-55. At least that's the score I have. We might be a little bit behind on our TV in Studio B here, but it was an extremely dangerous, hard foul again in a game where, and basically the Iowa State big man is wrapped up and basically forced down with a blow to the neck area. So it looked to me like said offender walked off the court after the refs had a look at it and went to the locker room, which, as far as I'm concerned, based on what I saw from about 27 different angles, is the right call. That's a cheap play, and it's especially cheap in a game where you are, getting blown out. It comes off very much as, well, we can't beat you, but we're going to try to hurt you. It was a bad play. That's Tennessee State is the 15 seed. Iowa State, one of the top teams in the tournament as a 2 seed, is the opponent trying to finish them off. Little more than 6 minutes to go in that ball game. Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line is open at 646-86. Dan Minnesota wants to know, is your Vikings news about Harrison Smith playing flag football? Could that be why he hasn't made a decision yet? No, it's not about that decision. It's about the fact that the Buffalo Bills have chosen not to match the Vikings' 1-year, $4.2 million guaranteed offer to offensive lineman Ryan Vandemark. And that means he's a Viking. I think that's a good pickup, at least on paper, at least until we find out that he's got like 8 concussions in his background, because we didn't have all that information as we celebrated some of the offensive line additions in free agency last year. But is there any question that in theory this helps the team? Because we do need a more accomplished swing tackle than we had. We know we've had injury issues for both Brian O'Neill and most assuredly Christian Darrisaw. So it's not as sexy a move as what we're going to do at the quarterback spot, etc. But it could be one of those sneaky good moves if he's up to the job, and I think is fairly highly regarded in that sense. And we've said there's still work that needs to be done along this offensive line. There's not any question about that. We still need a center. Maybe the draft, maybe a trade. There's the open question about whether Grenard is going to end up staying here or not. We'll get into all this with Ben Gessling at about 5 o'clock this evening. 64686 is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line as well. Dan Minnesota writes, if TCU ever gets the draft and they have to close schools and IGH due to traffic and proximity to said facility, I, for one, will not protest. Think of the kids sitting in that traffic. Dan, it's for the kids. Craig from Boston does ask, I think, a salient question. Why 3 days of missing school? I mean, the draft starts on a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. So they're saying, well, we got a day ahead with all the prep and all the people coming in and so you got to miss 3 days. No one will convince me this isn't prime first ballot Hall of Fame done as material. And the fact that so many people are willing to go along with it and almost yawn about it is further evidence that we're done. That we've been worn down to such a degree, beaten down to such a degree that we don't even think it's that big of a deal. There was a time where I think we treasured public education, any education, but certainly public education, more than we do today. I'm not even sure that it's close compared to where it once was. But that's sort of the situation that we're sadly we are in. I'll keep an eye on some other big dance activity the rest of the way, for sure. As I said, there's been no real... Well, I guess the interesting development would be that Alabama, their lead on 13-seed Hofstra is down to 5. I've got 67-62 with about 6 minutes to go in that game. So we'll keep an eye on that one. That would be an interesting upset. We've not really had anything all that dramatic. Certainly not as dramatic today as yesterday. The Miami of Ohio dream might be dying, although it's far from over. They're down 13 to Tennessee with about 7 minutes to go in the first half as well. One other thing I want to get into, completely unrelated to the big dance and more related to professional basketball, and we have some time to do it. The story broke that the best player, certainly an MVP candidate, and the best player on the Detroit Pistons is Cade Cunningham, is sidelined because of what's described as a collapsed lung. I think we may have alluded to that yesterday. And it's open-ended on when he might come back. It's in the history of the league, some players, the collapsed lungs have come back within a couple of weeks. I don't know if all collapsed lungs are equal. I have no idea what the particulars are in this case. It's a big blow to a team that's had a terrific season. They had kind of slumped a little bit the last couple of weeks. Maybe come back to the pack a bit, but they still have been at the top or near the top of the Eastern Conference standings for a long time this season. And the other thing that's been brought up is if he misses too much time, he's in danger of not reaching that 65-game threshold, that minimum threshold that you have to reach to be considered for any postseason honors in the league. And there's been a lot of pushback on that. It came up as well when Joker went down earlier. A couple of other players who may not be able, even Wembanyama, it was in question. It still may be in question whether he can meet 65 games. And we're saying, well, wait a minute. These guys are prime star players, prime postseason award material across the board. And this is a bad look for the league. I will say again, do not blame the National Basketball Association. I think they are blameless. Lay the blame where it belongs. It belongs on teams and on other players who basically set the wheels in motion in a way that the league was left with, I think, very little choice but to go to that draconian measure about a minimum number of games. And it's unfortunate that's now affecting play. Cade Cunningham is not a load management guy. Joker's not a load management guy. These guys have legitimate injuries. They may pay the price. But again, if you're mad at the league, you're mad at the wrong entity. You should be angry and bothered by the players, and they know who their names are, who sort of set this thing in motion. I was a big Jimmy Butler guy. I was all in favor of the Wolves getting him, Tibbs going to get him, because Jimmy Butler, at his best, is a terrific gamer. He's a terrific player. But Butler started to lose me in part because of the number of games he missed and the feeling that he even basically said, I don't get serious about anything till the second half of the season. And the message that you convey with that to your ticket buyer is embarrassing, because there's no discount on the prices. Just because you decide it doesn't matter till later, teams are still requiring its patrons, their patrons, to pay prime money almost no matter where you sit. So if you want to be mad, go ahead, but don't be mad at the league. The league did what it had to do because players forced the hand of the National Basketball Association. And unfortunately, and I would say if Cade Cunningham ends up being frustrated by this, Joker, although I don't think Joker gets frustrated by this kind of stuff. I don't think he cares that much about postseason honors. They should be mad. Focus your anger and your frustration at your fellow players who set the wheels in motion. It's not difficult to go back and locate the players who clearly load managed needlessly just because they could. And to that extent, the fingerprints from several teams are part of this too. Their fingerprints are on this decision because they made it too easy for players to load manage. The Wolves, as an organization, tried to push back against that. They made it clear and have made it clear that's not what they believe in here. And it's to their credit, I think, that that's the approach they took. But what that reminds you of is that they were trying to make a distinction between themselves and what other teams were up to. And in all honesty, as I said, too many teams made it way too easy, catered to the whims of players, made it way too easy for them to say, I'll just miss. I'll take another game off. What the hell's the difference? And at some point, the league goes, "What's a bad look?" I mean, how we have a long regular season. We have to at least pretend it matters because we're making people pay top dollar. So we have to sort of force their hand on this and say, okay, if you want to give up postseason honors, which by the way can be a financial loss, go right ahead. And if it now seems quaint or out of date or ill-timed because there's some players now who aren't load management players who are going to be penalized for it, I'll say again, they did what they had to do, and those players and those teams should be upset with the group of players who pretty much left the NBA with no choice but to do what indeed it did. Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line is open at 64686. Lavelle in about 15 minutes.
Human.
KFAN welcomes some great shows to Mystic Lake Amphitheater. The Guess Who will be there June 25th, John Mellencamp on July 14th, and Guns N' Roses will be there August 8th. Get the complete details on all our upcoming shows on the concert page at KFAN.com /calendar.
All right, we are indeed back. We've got Lavelle coming up in about 10 minutes. Ben Gessling, a 4:30 regular, will join at the top of the 5 o'clock hour today. Don't forget, about 5 or so on the Plus, Gopher women's basketball. They make their return to the tournament for the first time in, I believe, 8 years against Green Bay. And that's a game you can hear via Guardsy on, as I said, KFAN Plus. He says they've sold about, I think he said about 10,000 seats, which is pretty good. I mean, because obviously attendance has been a massive issue, both the men's and women's side. But I think the reasonable prices and the Gopher ascension, the fact that we're hosting games, went a long way towards, I think, getting, should have, I would think, a pretty good walk-up crowd as well, and even bigger if they win this evening and then go on to play round 2 on Sunday. I'm assuming against Ole Miss. I didn't get a final score in that game. I'll look for it in just a minute. We were going to do, on the men's side of the big dance, a live listen-in on what was a game that was starting to tighten up. Hofstra is a 13 seed against number 4 Alabama. But that's pretty much changed at this point. 2:12 to go. Alabama has pulled away and leads by 14 points, so there's no real drama there. Tennessee up on 11 seed Miami of Ohio, the team that had entered its postseason conference tournament undefeated, but still not that highly ranked because of their schedule. They did win their play-in game, but they're down 18 to Tennessee late in the first half. Villanova, Utah State is at the half. And Villanova, an 8 seed, is up 39 to 37. I'm looking at some other games. Big Ten in action a little later, hour and change from now. 9 seed Iowa against Clemson. After that, you got Rick Pitino and St. John's as a 5 seed against Northern Iowa. Also in the Big Ten, UCLA plays at later on this evening as well. Purdue as a 2 seed takes on Queens tonight. I'm trying to kind of stay somewhat Big Ten centric. And I think really those are the major ones at this point. One other pro basketball note, we were just talking about the angst regarding deserving players who may be ineligible to accept postseason awards because they may not reach the 65-game minimum threshold. An interesting piece by Johnny. I'm sure we'll talk to him about it in more depth Monday, although by then a lot of other things could have happened. But the moral of the story he's written most recently goes back to the Rudy Gobert discussion. And we spent some time on this yesterday. The status of Rudy Gobert as being a player that constantly seems to be on the defensive with ex-players, current players around the league, and dare I say it, even maybe occasionally his own teammates, is astounding to me. And I understand how he's a frustrating player offensively because of his limitations. That part I get. But as long as he's on your team, Wolves players, coaches, have to make the best of what he has to offer. If in the offseason you want to come to the conclusion that he has become more of a liability offensively than he is an asset defensively, you can do that. You can then see if there's a way you can move on him and say, well, it was a good run here, but we're not going to go any further with him. And therefore, we're going to try to be creative and find a way to get him out of town. That's fair. But to pout about what he can't do now, nobody wins because he's going to play. And he's certainly going to start. And Johnny's emphasis was on the offensive side, a belief that for the same reason, if he's going to be on the court because of what he offers defensively, you have to sort of redouble your efforts to get something out of him offensively. And that means getting him the ball in the right place, given his limitations in terms of what he can do. He doesn't really have any moves. He has no touch. So we all know it's got to be basically around the basket for a dunk, or an alley-oop, largely. Or get him in position where at least he gets fouled. Not a great free throw shooter, but still, you'll take your chances from time to time with him at the line. And I think part of the belief, part of the reason, because I had people texting saying, why are we obsessed with bringing slow-mo back? I think part of the reason is offered up in his piece, a belief that he knows how to play with Rudy, even though they've had their moments in the past. He understands how to feed him, how to make him better. And you look at where this team is, and you even look at the best of them a year ago offensively. If you can get something from Rudy, I'm not saying a lot, not saying you're expecting 30, I'm not even saying you're expecting 20, but to have him on the board, especially early in games, is an asset. Take some of the pressure off elsewhere. Generally, it's going to be a high percentage shot. But it's there's not a single episode of Charles Barkley and Company in which they can't find, especially Shaq, a vehicle through which, or an excuse to take another shot at Rudy Gobert. Some of it, I think, is inspired by Draymond. I really believe that's part of the deal. But in Shaq's case, it's clearly because Rudy made as much money as he did, and Shaq thinks if you're going to make that kind of money, you have to be a dominant offensive player, which Rudy is never going to be. But all the analytics indicate he's still a dominant defensive player, if not perhaps quite as good as he was when he won the Defensive Player of the Year award a couple years ago. But he has to be part of the solution because he's going to play. And so you can roll your eyes about him, and you can throw towels like a couple of players did the other day when he missed either a dunk or a layup. You can do that if you want, but you're cutting your nose to spite your face. You lose if you decide to double down on frustration, center on that about what Rudy can't do. Instead, use your imagination, use your creativity to get the best out of what he might have to offer. And if you're not going to get greatness from him on a given night offensively, you still have to live with it and understand what he does on the other end of the court. Off season, you want to go another direction, do it. But there ain't no trades now. And you're not going to play without him because this defense is porous without him. It's not even borderline professional when Rudy Gobert is not available. All right, let's do this. Let's pause, bottom of the hour break, and as I said, Ben Gessling will join at 5. Lavelle moved up to join us in just right now. If you have questions for Lavelle, 646-86. That's the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line on a Big Dance Friday, both on the men's and women's side here on the Fan.
There's nothing like live hockey. Experience Minnesota Wild action at Grand Casino Arena all season long, including Wild versus Canucks on April 2nd and Wild versus Seattle on April 7th. Secure your seats now at wild.com/tickets and join the excitement.
One other big dance note before we welcome Lavelle into the conversation. We were talking earlier about Iowa State, its dominant performance this afternoon against a 15 seed. I don't have the final score in front of me, but they were pretty much in charge of this game against Tennessee State, start to finish. They did, however, lose Joshua Jefferson with a left ankle injury. The last shot I saw him was on crutches, either heading from the locker room or to the locker room. Remember, he's a second-team All-American by the Associated Press, lands awkwardly after going up for a layup, only 2.5 minutes into the game. So, although Iowa State had no difficulty today, that could be a major blow to their chances as a 2 seed to advance. Lavelle E. Neal III now joins via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Let me start, Lavelle, with a big dance question from John from Minneapolis. Are you ready? Lavelle? Is there a button that needs to be pushed? I'll put him back on hold and see if there's something missing here. Because it's a fair question. It actually came up yesterday as well. We got him? Lavelle, you got us?
I'm here.
Oh, good. The bank I use the right bank, and maybe that doesn't work today for some reason. We have you now on the left bank, as we like to say in the technological business. Here's your toss-up basketball question. This is from John out of Minneapolis. What's going on with men's basketball in the state of Minnesota? This year, the state of Iowa has 3 universities in the tournament. Once again, the state of Minnesota has no representation on the men's side. When it comes to recruiting, the U of M has no in-state competition for the best players in the state of Minnesota. It seems like every year the U of M is sitting at home watching the tournament on TV. What has to change? Wisconsin represented in more than one place. Iowa represented in more than one place. Minnesota? Crickets. What the hell's going on here?
Well, how many Division I programs are there in Minnesota?
Well, not that many.
Well, 2, right?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Minnesota and St. Thomas now, right?
Yeah, St. Thomas. That's true. And did we lose in the NIT?
St. Thomas got close.
Yeah.
A little close, I guess.
Allegedly,
so,
yeah.
I mean, was that a texter? Whoever chimed in, I mean, he's got a point.
John from Minneapolis. Yeah, now let's say in fairness, I think I've seen some encouraging signs with Nico in the first year, but in terms of how competitive they were with really no players and a lot of injuries, but he's got to prove that he can get the right talent here. He can definitely coach, right? We know that, but he's got to have players, and he's got to have more players, and you know, the onus is on him. You got to obviously give him time because this was only year one, but
right.
That's still the challenge here is to sustain things. So it doesn't feel like we're starting over every year, right? Because that's what it has tended to feel like the last several years.
Yeah, especially with Ben Johnson coming in and having to deal with upheaval. Then, you know, the transfer portal kicked in, the NIL kicked in, and he was trying to keep players and lose those players. And Nico knows what the landscape is now. At least we know that he has the coaching chops to succeed. Now he's got to prove that he can, you know, part of it's recruiting, part of it's portaling, and the third part of it is retention. You know,
that's very true.
I think a good coach has to be good at all 3 of those. It's funny because I was overhearing some of your conversation with Garzi, and I read a story about this like 3 years ago about the college programs, and you get fired up about some of the schools that get the one and done kids, and you know AJ DeBanza may leave BYU after a year, and But you get these teams that are loaded with like the one and done. But, there's also the belief that in order to sustain and have a good college program, you got to grow old, and the teams that have players who have had a bunch of games under their belt and at decent levels of competition, those are the ones that end up, making runs. And that points to what the Gopher women are trying to achieve right now in their return to the big dance. So that's what Nico, the retention part, I think,
very true.
Has just as much importance as the other two factors in order to build a sustainable program. So Nico's got to be good at that. But I'm confident. I think it was one of the best hires Cole has made in his tenure at Minnesota. I said that last year when when he hired the guy, and it's been fortified all through the regular season. It was a tough year, but I think they're going to bounce back nicely. I think the other coaches in the Big Ten also feel the same way about Nico.
I want to talk a little bit more about the AD in just a minute, but I want to save that. I should mention, because I had a text earlier from 715 guy or gal wanting to know if we can listen, if they could listen to the Gopher women anywhere up or down the dial. It's actually Darren from Knapp, Wisconsin. And Darren, there's two ways you can do it. The easy way is via the iHeartRadio app, which is 100% free, and then just tap into KFAN Plus, and you can get it regardless of, you don't have to worry about frequency, you don't have to worry about power of signal. Now, if you're closer, it is available on 96.7 on the FM dial, but that might not be a powerful enough signal for a lot of people. So the easiest way is to get the app and just type in KFAN Plus or Gopher women's basketball, and it should come up, and all of the action will be available to you, probably starting about 5 o'clock. Pre-game show may have already begun, actually, according to Guardsy. It was going to start about 4:30. And so you could switch back and forth between us and that game.
Where's he from?
As well. He is from Knapp, Wisconsin, KNAPP, which is pretty close to the Dells, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think you guys would have an affiliate out there, would you?
Probably unlikely. That's why you need the app, because then it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in Timbuktu, and you could probably still get it via the app, right? That's the beauty of it. At least that's the way I
use the app frequently. I used the app extensively when I was down in Fort Myers a couple of weeks ago.
I know you did, which was much appreciated. Oh, speaking of that, I need this text translated. This is from Clayton in Rochester. Dan, Lavelle was on with Nordo earlier this week talking about what he saw at Twin Spring Training. It sounds like he was most impressed with Pablo Lopez's confidence level related to personal hygiene and his non-throwing hand. What's he talking about? What were you talking about?
Well, that is like cherry picking at its finest there. One thing got him semi-aroused and he wants to latch onto it. No, I was in a press box one day when Pablo was sitting there.
Okay.
We ended up having a nice conversation about, Paul Skeens and started talking about coming back from surgery because it was at that point he was like a day away from being cleared to allow the sweat with his right arm because he couldn't allow anything in that elbow area right after surgery. He was still wearing the big contraption. I was like, man, because I was telling about covering players like Buxton when they had shoulder surgeries and how life-altering it is to have to wear a contraption for like several weeks right after surgery. Because if you're right-handed, you have to start doing everything left-handed. To which Pablo replied, "Yes, I still wipe left-handed after my first Tommy John surgery." So that's where that came from.
You can't make that up. Oh, my goodness. Well, like you said, what our listeners grab onto and gravitate towards, it's there's no low. I mean, every time you say, well, how low can you go, they go a little bit lower. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it's true. It's a fact of life. Anyone's had surgery,
it's practical.
You have to come to grips with the realization that you have to do things differently with different limbs and different arms.
Yeah. You're not wrong about that. I like I said, I never thought it would kind of come to that, but you're 100% not wrong. Let me ask you about remind me to get back to the AD and some changes made in the hockey programs. But I want to get to these numbers, which I thought were interesting, if they are accurate. This has to do with the World Baseball Classic and the champion, the final of the game, the gold medal game. the WBC championship game comfortably outdrew, in terms of ratings, games 1 to 6 of the 2025 NBA Finals and beat the series average. Now, this ball guy acknowledges some of that might have been Thunder Pacers didn't capture the imagination of the nation, even though it was a very good basketball matchup. But this writer points out that the WBC final also outdrew Game 4 of the 2024 NBA Finals and was only 500,000 viewers shy of beating the series average. So the conclusion for this ball writer, Matt McCarthy, is baseball has clearly established itself as the number 2 sport in the country again behind football, and he says there's no longer any debate at this point. Pretty controversial. Is he right? Is he wanting to believe something that's not quite true, or what do you think?
I didn't know that baseball fall in the third. When did that happen?
Well, I think for a while it definitely had overall in terms of some of the numbers. But basketball's grown. The TV deal definitely reflects that. Yeah.
They're in the middle of the first year of 11 years, $77 billion television bonanza. That definitely shows that. Baseball fell behind football, what, about 25 years ago?
That sounds about right.
Yep. So I don't know if the WBC should be used as the catalyst, as the reasoning for popularity in baseball surging. I do think in recent years with the pitch clock and, the phenomenon of Shohei Ohtani has drawn eyes to the sport worldwide.
No question.
I wrote about the WBC for my 3-2 pitch, and I pointed out that attendance for the WBC was 1.6 million fans. That may outdraw the Twins this year. So yeah, it's working. It's trending in the right direction. But I wouldn't use that to point to Major League Baseball selling as number 2 or wherever. I think baseball needs to do its own. I think MLB needs to do its own growing to prove it itself. I wouldn't use the WBC just proves that Latin America loves baseball passionately. Japan and Korea loves baseball passionately. We can find ways to field teams for the Czech Republic. If you didn't notice, Mike Honori's son was a center fielder for Italy.
That's right.
By the way,
that's a good story.
And Joe Vavra's son was the infielder for the Czech Republic. So they're finding ways to field teams. I think the espresso machine in the Italian dugout was a master stroke. I'm surprised they didn't have a guy spitting a pizza in there at some point as well. But I was entertained. I loved watching how the fans responded to their players. And it's definitely something to grow on. It's something baseball can definitely take advantage of. But I think I want to not necessarily use the WBC to point that things are better in MLB. MLB still has some growth waiting to happen as soon as they get their financial house in order and figure out a CBA going forward, and owners understanding that they need to do a better job of splitting their own local television revenue. There's some things I think that would lead to more growth, faster rising franchise values, and better television deals as soon as they get their crap together in-house.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's go back to a little university talk having to do with this case with the athletic director. I referred to him yesterday as the smiling assassin, Mark Coyle, because he's fired a lot of coaches, or, again, mutual. We can argue about whether it was mutual.
Can we say he's made a lot of mistakes?
Well, here you can, but what I mentioned yesterday was there's that old cliche about are you better off? What's the best approach when you're the AD? Giving a coach who has been good but is struggling an extra year to figure it out, or do you not want to basically wait around to do that, and so you become very proactive at the point where you think you need to? And obviously, that was the case with Whalen. I think a lot of people, we talked about it at the time, that maybe she deserved another year. He decided she didn't. Ben Johnson was in that position. You could say both hockey coaches were in that position. The key to it, as we know, though, is what? How good you do on the replacement. Because if you do well on the replacement, you're going to be off the hook, even if you made the original hire, right? That's the bit, is You get extra shots at it, but you better get it right the second time. If you didn't get it right the first, you better get it the second. In the case of women's basketball, it certainly looks like he did.
Yeah.
In the case of men, as we talked about earlier, signs I think are promising. It's yet to be seen when it comes to hockey, both on the men's side and the women's side.
Yeah, and I will extend that out further. I think the PJ Fleck hiring has been okay.
That's a good
he's done
term
better than a lot of previous coaches before him. But my concern with PJ is not the floor, it's the ceiling.
Yes.
And I think that's something that has to be watched. I think the other pressure point for most athletic directors in the game today is also the importance of boosters, owners, NIL, collectives, and all that helps as part of the lifeblood of a college organization that he has to be cognizant of. I don't hear much about Mark Cole going out Glen-handing boosters or trying to raise money for the school. I'm sure he's trying to do it, but he doesn't come across as a guy who's a big sales guy in that regard. That's another area where the University of Minnesota has to grow. Football-wise, there's still too many empty seats in the stands for some of these Gopher games that I care to see. I think they got to do something as far as maybe giving tickets away to high school kids to get that place full and loud. Now you've got, and you can argue, and when I'm pointing this out in my 3-2 pitch and another item, the Minnesota Gopher hockey job, maybe the number one job in college hockey. If it's not, it's in the top 5 for sure. In terms of prestige, location, talent pool, nice arena. You're not in Blacksburg or Lubbock or some outpost. You're in the Twin Cities. It's a good media market. It's got a lot of things going for it that has to be taken advantage of. So he should be able to have this pick of the litter for a new coach, men and women. Months ago, the program fell off since he last went to the championship game and blew a lead in the third period. Brad Frost is an A-plus, A1 guy. Just a great human being. But, I heard 3-4 years ago, the fan base was like, when are we going to win another championship? It's been 10 years, So I'm sure that caught up with him in the end. So Coyle has a big challenge on his hands, filling his 2 jobs. But to me, it's kind of hard to screw this one up because you should be able to get the best of the best to choose from.
You should. Yeah, there's no question about that. And I think, I would still also argue that I know college hockey is much deeper than it once was, right? The number of programs that are
Agreed.
good definitely has broadened. But there's still a part of me that says that if you are at the University of Minnesota, you can't, there's no excuse for even one season in which you have fewer victories than you've had in any season since I think like 1971-72. That's just, you know what I'm saying?
I looked it up.
There's levels of it of acceptance where you go, okay, all right, it's kind of a rebuilding or whatever. But there's something that tells me you should never have a record that dreadful, right? That it goes back over, almost 60 years. I think that is what made him a little bit on the vulnerable side.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it dropped off. And it went from him having an embarrassment of riches. I mean, the fact that he couldn't win with Matty Nyes and Brock Faber and some of the other loaded teams he had was a little disappointing. But how far it's fallen off since then has been disturbing. Apparently he's got a decent class coming in next year. The other factor into this, and we're seeing it in college basketball with NCAA teams being able to bring in players from Europe who are kind of affiliated with professional teams. As long as they don't earn a certain amount of money, they come over and play NCAA. We see that happening in college hockey. These Canadian junior players now could come play in NCAA, and that opens up another pot of talent to choose from as well. So whoever replaces Moscow has to be adept in mining that area for talent. So the Gopher hockey program is too big to fail, just because of all the reasons I laid out earlier. And that's why Cole cannot mess this one up. This would be a fireable offense if Cole messes up these hires with hockey.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think he's been vindicated on the women's side and men's in basketball.
Yeah.
At least, again, it's still incomplete on Nico. He's got to take it further than he has, but the early start is encouraging. And the case of the women's side, it looks like it has, at least for the moment, been turned, right? Because I think they got some good recruiting coming in next year. And they're a legitimate team this year. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to win the title, but they're in good position. And it wasn't like they were a bubble team, right? They were solidly in this thing as a top 4 seed, which is why they are indeed hosting. Will you have to go Sunday if the Gophers win tonight or this afternoon into the evening? Will you go to their Sunday game, which would help them advance to the next level, next round?
I think Chip Scott has been tabbed to follow because he ended up, because of man and women power issues, the columnists have been asked to kind of fill in here and there.
Yeah.
And Chip kind of fell into basketball. So I think Chip's going to be the guy on Sunday if and when the Gophers win.
Yeah.
My column for today was on Jenna Geyer, the leading scorer for Green Bay, who is from Centennial and from Circle Pines. And it's a good story about her going somewhere and finding herself and coming back, as the Horizon Player of the Year. But in all reality, the Gophers should win this one by 20 points, just because there's too much depth and they play Doberman-like defense, and it's going to be, I think, a little tough for the Phoenix to handle. So I expect the Gophers to be playing on Sunday. And it's a great finish to a year for them.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, a very good opportunity. Guardsy was saying that they had sold for tonight's game upwards of 10,000, which, again, for University of Minnesota women's basketball right now, because it's been in the doldrums in that regard, that's tremendous. And they were smart. They being, I don't think the university does this, but I think this is all NCAA generated. The ticket prices are not absurd by current standards, which is also attracting people who are maybe casual fans. Say, let's go check this thing out. This might be kind of fun.
And that game's coming on in minutes, ladies and gentlemen.
That's
Here's what you do. You set record to the DVR, or whatever you call your recording device. You listen to the rest of Bumper to Bumper until it goes off, and then you catch up with the Gopher game.
Yeah, well, you can also, I will not be offended if you want to listen to Guardsy as well. That's another way to indeed go for sure.
That's true. The dulcet tones of Justin Guard.
That's it.
Who's rising. He's rising like a rocket in basketball announcing circles.
That's it. He's taking the town by storm. There's no question about that. Real quick, Vikings add another, well, they don't add, they bring back Carson Wentz. So what does this tell us here? You've got 3 quarterbacks. I don't know whether Brosmer is even under contract. I'd be surprised if he's back. But it certainly sounds, Lavelle, like we're going veteran heavy outside, of course, of what J.J. McCarthy represents. What did you take out of the news that Wentz is coming back as well?
There's a big sign flashing above Twin Cities Performance Center that says, boy, did we screw this up a year ago. That's what I got out of this, is that based on how everything that happened as soon as Darnold went to Seattle and Daniel Jones went to Indianapolis was downhill for the Vikings in terms of the quarterback room, and they'll be damned if they're going to let that even have a hint of that try to repeat itself in 2026. So they've got Kyler Murray, who's been accomplished, but there's some work. I wrote a note in Sunday's paper saying that it's great, that he's put up some numbers and is a mobile guy, but eventually you got to win from within the pocket, and that's going to be KFC's greatest challenge with this talented guy. And now they got a veteran guy in Carson Wentz, who I hope he's recovered from his shoulder surgery. But remember that? He looked like he was about to die in his last time we saw Wentz, we thought the gurney was coming out for him. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
So
right.
I just hope he's 100% and he can learn some experience in the quarterback room. And, and we'll see what happens with Brosmer. Maybe he'll be a candidate for the practice squad, or if they try to move him there, someone may try to claim him. But the Vikings are pulling out all the stops to make sure that the wrongs of 2025 are not repeated.
What's the Sunday column, did you say?
I led it with my advice for further growth in the WBC.
Beautiful.
And I wrote a note about Kyler Murray and about, I think, I don't know who, has in mind for either one of the men's and women's jobs, but you got to have a conversation with Wroblewski, the coach from the women's gold medal winning team in Italy. You got to have a conversation with him about either one of those jobs because, he had to put together a winning team with mostly professionals, but college players who were so good that the college players ended up taking leading roles, and the coaches got to make sure the professional players understand that this is our best way to win with these, guys leading the way, and the veterans had to play like supporting roles. That takes structure, organization, and communication to me. So I think it's worth at least a conversation with Cole about one of those gigs at the University of Minnesota.
Have a wonderful weekend. We'll chat next week.
All right, you too. Take care.
Thanks, Lavelle, and thank you for his flexibility from a time standpoint. He generally joins us at 5:30. We moved him up because Ben Gessling had to be moved down. In fact, after a very short pause, we'll check in with Ben. Vikings made a move today. They added a player that I think might well help them. I say that advisedly because I think we felt the same way in free agency a year ago. I think proof that you never really know, but at least on paper, it sounds like a solid move that makes some sense. We'll talk about that and anything else on Ben Gessling's mind when we return.